The emptying. In the last field the wall held, the manifestation was named the fullness of deity bodily. He wore the title Yahuwah keeps for himself. Thomas called him God and was blessed for it. Read only that chapter and the question would look settled and easy. It is not easy, because the same Bible that calls him the fullness of deity also says he did not know the day, that he learned obedience, that he grew, that he could do nothing of himself, that the Father was greater than he, that at the end he cried out as if he'd been left alone in the dark. These are not the verses of the Trinity's opponents. They are in the text red letters as often as not, and they are the heavy guns of every reading that says the manifestation is something less than God. So they go on the table at full weight, and with them, the knot the last field tied and handed here. The Son who is called God, Heb 1:8, also has a God who anointed him, 1:9. The emptying is its answer. One who is fully God laid himself low into a servant's place, and from inside that place the Father is genuinely his God. The texts, nor the Son but only the Father knows that day, Mark 13:32. The Father is greater than I, John 14:28. The Son can do nothing of his own accord, John 5:19. Not to do my own will but the will of him who sent me, John 6:38. He learned obedience through what he suffered, Hebrew 5:8. Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, Luke 2:52. My God, why have you forsaken me, Matt 27:46. And over them all, the word that names what's happening. Though he was in the form of God, he emptied himself. Ekinosin, taking the form of a servant. How many readers walk in, already holding the answer, and it's a good one. The two natures doctrine. Christ is one person in two natures, divine and human. As God he is omniscient, co-equal, eternal. As man he does not know the day, learns, grows, submits, dies. Every subordination text files to the human nature, every divinity text to the divine. The person is one, the natures are two, the verses sort between them. This is ancient, coherent, and almost certainly what you believe if you grew up in the church. Hold on to it, these pages test it fairly, they don't knock it over. Arianism loads the same texts, but reads them straight down. The Son is less because he is less, the first and highest creature but a creature. The Father is greater, equals greater in being. Nor the Son knows, equals the Son is not God, so not omniscient. No machinery at all. The plainest reading on the field, and that plainness is its whole appeal. Stop here and the chapter belongs to whoever the reader already was. But there is a word under all of this, and for about 200 years it has carried, in the popular mind, a meaning the Greek doesn't. Look at the word ekinosin, emptied himself. Every English Bible has to make a choice here, and the choice most readers have absorbed is emptied himself of something, of his divine attributes, his omniscience, his power. That is the picture most modern readers carry. But look at what Paul actually wrote, because the Greek doesn't say it. There is no of, no genitive of content. The verb is reflexive, hiauton ekenosen, he emptied himself. Not he emptied deity out of himself. And Paul gives the manner in the participle that follows, morphein doulou labon, taking the form of a servant. That is an addition, not a subtraction. He emptied himself by taking on servanthood. The next verse glosses it plainly. Etapenosen hiauton, he humbled himself. And everywhere else Paul uses this verb kenoo. It is figurative. To make void, of no effect. Romans 4:14, 1 Cor 1:17. The old King James caught it better than most. Made himself, of no reputation. So the verse is not describing a God who poured out his Godhead. It describes a God who made himself nothing, who had every right to show himself for what he was and refused to, who took the servant's form and the servant's lowliness all the way to a cross. The emptying is of self, not of deity. Calvin saw it first. Lest that sound like special pleading, hear it from the giant of the Reformation, the man whose own tradition gave us the two natures. On this exact verse, Calvin writes, Christ indeed could not divest himself of Godhead, but he kept it concealed for a time, that it might not be seen, under the weakness of the flesh. Hence he laid aside his glory in the view of men, not by lessening it, but by concealing it. Concealed, not lessened. And Calvin anticipates the obvious objection, how can he be emptied, while he is working miracles, and showing the Son of God all through the Gospels, and answers it with one image. The abasement of the flesh was, notwithstanding, like a veil, by which his divine majesty was concealed. A veil, not a subtraction, a veil. The emptying of attributes reading is not the historic Christian reading at all. It is a 19th century development, and it was criticized in its own day precisely because it tends to leave Christ not fully God while he walked the earth. The older, mainstream reading, Calvin's, and the fathers before him, is the one the Greek yields. Glory veiled, Godhood retained. The canon shuts the door on divestiture. Calvin's veil is not a rescue. It is just reading the rest of the Gospels honestly. If the Incarnation had removed divine attributes, then during the ministry the man could not do the things only God does. But he does them constantly. He forgives sins on his own authority, and the scribes correctly gasp, "Who can forgive sins but God alone?" He does it to prove the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive. Mark 2:5-10. He says before Abraham was, I am. John 8:58, the divine self-naming ministry. He accepts worship. Matt 14:33, John 9:38, which every angel and apostle in Scripture refuses. He knows men's hearts. Luke 5:22, and manifests glory in his signs. John 2:11, and the transfiguration is that glory, flashing through the veil, for 3 terrified disciples. A Christ who had divested deity could do none of this. So the divestiture reading is not merely weak on the Greek. It is falsified by the Gospels themselves. What was set aside was never the Godhead. It was the wielding of it for himself. The line runs cleanly between self and others. Divine power poured out freely for others and for the mission, and never once grasped to his own advantage. The wilderness temptations are the whole thing in miniature. Each one is, use your power for yourself, bread for his own hunger, a spectacle to prove himself, a shortcut around the cross, and each is refused. The 12 legions he could have called at the arrest, Matt 26:53, are the same refusal at the end. The power was live the entire time. Not using it was the emptying, and it was always this way. This is not a New Testament novelty. It is the climax of a pattern running from Sinai. Yahuwah's kavod, his glory, is always veiled to meet humans, concealed so it will not consume them. He hides Moses in the cleft and covers him with his hand, Acts 33:20-23. He comes to Sinai wrapped in cloud and fire and darkness. His glory dwells behind the tabernacle veil. Veiled, not lessened, Calvin's word, written into the Torah long before Philippians. And the servant prophecies foretell exactly this descent. My servant, high and lifted up, Isaiah 52:13, the very phrase used of Yahuwah enthroned in Isaiah 6. Yet, no form or majesty that we should look at him, 53:2. The veiled majesty, form of a servant, Phil 2:7, is the Ebed of Isaiah. Even learned obedience is prophesied, the servant is taught. Morning by morning he wakens my ear, I was not rebellious, Isaiah 54:5. Divestiture has no root anywhere in the Hebrew Scriptures. God never sheds his deity to appear, he only ever veils his glory to appear. The kenosis is the oldest pattern in the book, brought to its end. The witness from below, and there is a stranger confirmation. The demons who never met the Galilean carpenter name him on sight. The Holy One of God, Mark 1:24, Son of the Most High God, Mark 5:7, have you come to torment us before the time, Matt 8:29. They know him as their appointed judge, which means they know him from before. The veil concealed his majesty in the view of men. The spirits are not men, they saw straight through it. If the godhood had been divested, there would have been nothing left for them to recognize. Their terror is testimony, the fullness was present, only veiled. Now look again with the word, Calvin, the canon, the Torah, and the demons on the table, rerun the readings. Arianism read the subordination text most plainly of all, and here it strains rather than dies. Emptied himself reads most naturally as the emptying of a prior fullness, which fits the deity already shown at Col 2:9, but a committed Arian can still read, form of God, as exalted status, not deity, and empty that. So the kenosis presses Arianism hard. It does not, by itself, falsify it. That falsification came a field back at Col 2:9. The two natures reach the right destination. Calvin himself is the proof. Deity retained, glory veiled. They are not refuted. Their cost is the machinery. The reader must sort almost every clause between two natures the text never marks, and the sharpest case is not knowing but becoming. He learned obedience, Heb 5:8, a divine person who cannot change, who already perfectly obeys. Learned, a gap in knowledge can be filed to the human nature. It is harder to file change in the subject, because the one who learns is the one person, and he is divine. It holds, but only by that sorting, clause after clause. The Memra reads all 7 at face value. One subject, no seam. The one who is the fullness made himself nothing, veiled the glory, refused his own advantage, took the servant's whole estate down to death, while able, every second, to stop. The available legions do not break that reading, they are that reading. Strict Unitarianism strolls through this chapter. Of course a man is limited, but only by spending what it already surrendered at the divinity wall, the forgiving of sins, the I am, the accepted worship. The bill it dodges here, it paid there. Modalism is left for its own ground. Note only that a son who prays not my will but yours strains a reading where the one God merely wears the role of son. The one honest residual. End of section. It is not all tidy. Mark 13:32, nor the son knows, is the verse that costs the Memra reading something too, and it is not hidden here. If the full Godhood was present, how does he genuinely not know? On this reading, the same way he genuinely did not call the legions that were genuinely available. He did not draw on the omniscience that was his, real non-access, not a mask over secret knowledge. The Son does not know is true of him as he chose to live, exactly as he did not summon the legions is true though he could have. That is coherent. The legions proof possess and not use is real, but it is not transparent. It is held hand over mouth, and it may have an old root. The manifestation already speaks and come into no terms. Now I know that you fear God. Gen 22:12. A thread for later, not a claim for now. This residual is shared by the two natures. They hold the same mystery from the other side. It is not a place the Memra bleeds alone. The receipt, reading, reads plainly, must interpret, tag. Hazar, Mark 13:32, all 7, a man is limited. Nothing here the divinity worship texts of the last field stay unpaid. Plain here the cost was paid at an earlier field. Modalism, a son who petitions a father, not my will but yours. Tension, carried to its own battleground. Arianism, all 7, the son is a creature. Emptied himself reads most naturally as emptying a prior fullness, so it fits deity, but form of God can be read as exalted status. Tension, pressed hard here, the falsification was Col 2:9, a field back, not the kenosis itself. The Memra, all 7, one subject, made himself nothing, veiled the glory, kept the deity in the live exit. Mark 13:32, full Godhood present, genuinely not drawn upon, a residual it shares with the two natures. Plausible, reads all 7 with one subject and no nature seam, shares the Mark 13:32 residual with the two natures view. Two natures sorted to the human nature, a nature seam the text never marks, learned obedience of a divine, immutable person. Plausible, reaches the right end, Calvin by sorting nearly every clause between two natures. The receipt is the chapter's only verdict. You have watched each reading take the same shots at the same texts, with the Greek and Calvin and the whole canon in hand. Carry the tally forward. The adding up is yours.